Hey,
Hey,
everybody. Welcome to I think it's our fifth or sixth episode. Doesn't matter. One of those. Here, I'm broadcasting from party headquarters. We have co-host Adrian with us again this week. And we'll just take a look at what's going on here. We know today is officially the first day. We're running for our federal leadership race in Canada for April 28th. So as we knew before it was coming, and we knew it would be more or less a race between Carney and Polyev. No one even, it's funny, it's not my topic or anything, but no one seems to even be talking about the NDP. Like it's maybe some
people are,
internal well, they are,
but
but they're
but
not
you're
talking
talking
about it as
about
a,
the cliff they went off and the
yeah, yeah,
support they
yeah,
lost.
yeah, absolutely. Or they're talking about how bad Jagmeet is or how
Yeah.
ineffectual they'll be. But I just mean there
Otherwise, than
always
nothing.
yeah, there always seemed to be a nod that, even though no, they're not going to win, we all kind of would, well, NDP too, and they're doing something. Anyways, not to get off topic, forget about those guys, but we've got Carney, and we've brought Mr. Carney up before in the past, of course, and we will be talking about him constantly, I suppose, for the next month or so. But hopefully just the next month or so, not the next 4 years. But I thought it was going to be interesting. Okay, so we're predisposed conservative. I think that's clear to anybody who would watch consistently. Um, we, but I don't want to fall into the same trap that we would accuse our opponents of, that we don't
Echo
try to look
chamber.
at both sides. Yeah. So I spent the last couple of days trying to, with a clear, open mind, take a look at Mr. Carney, um, see what he says, what his best friends would say about him, and then what his critics would say about him, and then just for fun at the end, we'll talk about the WEF stuff because it's also fun. But essentially, I tried to determine what Carney's sort of five biggest achievements were, and they were listed as: he was the governor of the Bank of Canada in the 2008 economic crash, and he is credited for he acted quickly and reduced rates earlier. And then apparently, as far as we fared the best in the G7, according to that, we didn't pay the price that everybody else paid. So
I recall that.
that, yeah, so
Yeah.
he's got that going for him. So I mean, I'm sure that would have been a big time of crisis and upheaval, comparable to what people would think is going on today, crisis and upheaval with the madman south of the border. So then that was in 2008. In 2013, he was the first non-Brit to be the Bank of England. Um, he had a few achievements there, but they're like, it's bank talk, it's boring, I won't bother. But there's one or two major achievements there, but they all basically had to do with modernizing the Bank of England. So now some would say, there was, yeah, some major accomplishments, but we won't get into that. And then shortly after that, he was there during the Brexit response. He looks like he was again quick to cut rates and implement quantitative easing. So depending on your understanding of quantitative easing and rate cutting, you could determine whether or not those are good or bad things. But it seemed to help with the rocky road that Brexit had been on. And then, of course, he's owns Brookfield, or is connected to Brook. I don't know how everything works there exactly, but he seems to have $1 billion company, and he seems to have done okay in that regard. So his resume is impeccable, I suppose, in that regards. But
I'd agree.
yeah, now
Yeah.
that was the positive side of things. Now, on the negative side of things, his detractors, if you sort of group them all together, Prime Minister Harper says that the uh, Carney kind of exaggerates his involvement at that time, and actually calls it kind of a douche move because it undermines Jim Flaherty's legacy at the time, because Jim Flaherty was the economic or the uh,
Finance minister.
finance minister, yeah, and Carney was just the governor of the Bank of Canada at that time. So again, that's one of what his critics would say. Critics also say, Liz Truss has no love for him. She was the short-lived prime minister in in England over there that was not happy with his, and she said that the policies that he put in place led to severe economic consequences that they're still sort of falling apart from. And to sum up, like there was lots of different independent critics, some journalists, some this and that, a lot from England, because I guess he spent a good chunk of time there, as we just discussed.
At a pivotal moment.
At the pivotal moments, yes.
Right. So
He's his critics would say that he is excellent at self-promotion and very poor on delivery. So
well, the take
that would
I heard
sum up.
about I heard a take about his time in England, and the initial take was they liked him not being English because it just showed how non-political the role is. But then at the end, it was like he shouldn't have been saying anything about Brexit in a lot of people's eyes because it kind of gave a political inclination, to say the least, which from the role of the head of the central bank is not what the country is expecting. So that's something I've heard from people who aren't
In the
fans of
critic, you're in the critic stuff that I read, they said he politicized his position. There was some talk of that
with
again, but
comments on
uh,
Brexit.
yeah, a
And
lot of those things. But they're probably full show conversations of people who know all about
well,
that and the
I
intricacies. But
I
go ahead, sorry.
I heard that he was saying that basically like it's going to complicate matters for the English economy and not for the better, which is just it's a fair thing. But I mean, I can't think really back. Like I haven't tried, but think of a Jerome Powell statement where I thought it was like super pro Biden or super pro Trump. It never Jerome Powell never really, as much as I'm not a Jerome Powell guy or a Greenspan or what's the either way, like it's a big deal for the head of the central bank to not be political as much as you know what I mean. It's so I saw that he kind of seemed to leave England, came in with all the fanfare, but he left on a very low note. Is what it's kind of
Well,
what I
that seemed to be the sum of his critics.
sorry to
Now,
interrupt your point. Just to add
no,
to
no,
it.
you're not interrupting. You're adding to the so I would say that what I just did there was like a level one analysis of of Mr. Carney. That's like the
Pros and cons.
surface level.
Yeah.
Yeah, but surface level one pros and cons of Carney, because this is it's his 15 years of his life brushed down into bullet points. So I tried to give him the same sort of benefit of the doubt that again that we're trying to give to all these cases, again for the benefit of ourselves plus the benefit of voting public and
The
whoever
open
may pay
minded.
attention.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I did look into I was actually at the library today, and while I was there returning a book, I tried to grab his book Values to just take it out and see, because I would much rather hear what he has to say directly from himself. But of
You
course,
just
it's
wanted
out,
to
and
keep this message from propagating. You were just going to leave it on hold for 2 weeks. What I'm
yeah,
saying.
absolutely, yeah, keep it out. But it's on hold for a few. Obviously, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I did do a bit of research into. I know we talked about his book before, what and sort of summarized it, but I guess the
With price on carbon, and let's
yeah, okay. So basically, the critics of the book, Carney's vision that he outlines in his book. Again, if you don't already know, watching, he's like big on ESG, DEI, woke philosophy, zero carbon credits, keeping 80% of fossil fuels in the ground. These are all his like things he's stated directly himself. Um, Completely transitioning away from certain industries. Uh, what is it? The term that we like to degrowth. What is it? What's the term I'm looking for? Here. deindustrialize. Yes, we want to roll back. We want to roll back manufacture everything. So in his book, and what prompted that is because I've been trying to find some evidence on him. I was watching this one show, and the guy was doing like pointing behind him, like quoting from directly from his book and saying how Carney said directly that we would need to, if it was, we would have to restrict our, our restricting our movements, restricting freedoms, basically a WEF, World Economic Forum, like worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I was like, well, that sounds pretty bad. But then I did try to do some more research and I tried to find out if that was a direct quote. But it turns out, just like one side does, the other side does as well. It seems like that wasn't a direct quote, but a direct quote from someone who had been quoting him in another article. And the implications were one as opposed to, the implications go from that Carney's pushing like change in behavior, which I mean, I don't think anybody would disagree that changing behaviors can be good for society as a whole. But at the end of a rifle is what they seem to be implying, that we would be forced to eat less meat and travel. And they just seem to be lumping the worst, like the worst extremes of the WEF, just because he shares some similar climate goals and has been to WEF meetings and he chairs the board. The WEF has not been convicted of any crimes, but the worst conspiracy theories against the WEF have been automatically attributed to him. So, not saying one way or the other, but that's also not a fair characterization right out of the gate, I would say.
Well,
Right? You
I
can't.
would say it's one thing to be some sort of dinky member of the WEF, but I think he was like a prestigious, like a higher up.
Yeah, yeah, he's all the way up.
So
He's yeah.
he had
Assume
to
he's
have.
all the way in.
I'm not saying he's a mastermind or whatever, but it's kind of like
No,
a
he is.
racketeer
He's
card.
he
Like
is he is a
he's in.
mastermind
Yeah, he
in
is,
there.
and yeah,
Assume that. Yeah, he's all the
yeah.
way up.
But you're right. So what
That's
you're more or less saying, it's not like there's a tangible hot mic moment where Carney's like, "Oh, they're gonna eat the bugs," and you can hear him
that's yes.
giggling.
There doesn't
Like
seem to be any of these hot mic or like yes. If you read
he's
his
very
book, it's yeah. Like even the criticisms in his book, it's like they would actually say. Uh, there's like 5 points here, but they're all elite solutions. It's like, if you and your buddies when you were young, you're the first guy who came across communism when you were like 16 and you wanted to be the
you got it
cool
all figured
guy.
out. You got it all
Right.
figured
So
out.
you'd go to the pub, or you're too young for a pub, but the treehouse, whatever, with all your buddies, and you'd be like talking in all these like theoretical,
We'll take the
like
land, and
yeah,
we'll
yeah,
all work
yeah,
together.
this, that. That's what it seems to be to me more of. I think that's what I'm not as much of a WEF conspiracy theorist as the next guy. I just see these as a bunch of guys like that, like sitting around the pub, pontificating and outdoing each other as an intellectual exercise about, like how should we run the Sims game that the world is, and if we trade these Catan oil for sheep over here, that's the but the
Well,
practical implication of those. For one, they
yeah.
don't have the ability to practically impose these things. And I mean, I think that's what this election is about: is this sort of technocratic elite dictating against sort of a more, populist approach where,
Well, it's
rah
happening
rah,
all
look
over the
the man
West.
in the street. It's happening all over the West. So of course he's been, you know, elbows deep or elbows up deep in all of that elite stuff. I guess it's only an issue if you believe that the WEF is actually controlling the world and can influence way more than the general population believes, then I guess you should be really, really scared of Mark Carney. But if you don't believe that, then doesn't mean you shouldn't be scared of Mark Carney for just normal reasons. There seems to be no argument that he's all about stakeholder capitalism and all the buzzword capitalisms and having the state and government working in conjunction and technocratic control with, elite. He leans in all those directions in his own writings and everything. So I don't think that's controversial. I would say the only reason you would be scared of that is because,
Disagree with their values.
well, not even that. Like, forget the values debate. Just quite simply, if Trump is all pro not that, right, and he's all pro not green technology and carbon credits, how do we compete with him to the south? Like, how do we? And if you want your, like, I mean, it's inevitable whether we fight our hardest or we get more trade with Brussels, we're still going to have to deal with this guy to the south. So they have diametrically opposed views about resource development in North America. So it seems like there's no hope of, I mean, forget all this. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to sort that out.
Well, I think what it'll be is like it's kind of been for the last 10 years where their economy is going to grow, ours is going to stymie, and the divide is going to widen, and it'll just break. Like it's already kind of breaking, and they're trying to blame Trump for breaking it. But like, Canada has gone through a really crappy, crummy 10 years, and so has America because we've all had the COVID stuff, and that impacted everybody, and there's no question about it. But somehow, even through all the infighting, they managed to grow their economy, and we managed to shrink ours. It's just, you can't keep doing that. And to see the answer to be, yeah, like ship everything to Europe and China, that's not to say we shouldn't do that, but it's still not the answer, especially if you actually care about global warming, because ships are the biggest polluters in global warming possible. Why not sell ethically sourced stuff to America? Keep your standards at, that we have here.
Well, I mean, we know the reason why is because before this 51st state business, the election was about affordability. And again, you could say, as a anti-Carney remark, you could say, "Ooh, Carney's preaching Canada proud, but he is fanning the flames of divisiveness to the south." And so you could criticize him for that. Or one way of looking at it is you could say, like, "Ooh, there's a guy who, when is faced with the the prospect of being just a continuation of an existing disastrous 10-year reign, he's able to,
Pivot.
take a look over, yeah, pivot, take a look over here, forget about looking at all of that." Like, I mean, he took out Poilievre's tax policy. Like, I mean, he was running on that for months beforehand, axe the tax, and now it's like,
He's running
and
on the
then,
conservative platform. There's no question about it. But what,
yeah, yeah.
like we said,
But
though,
now
Pierre's had
that's
to
out
step
of the,
up. Pierre's talking about 15% income tax. He's
I
throwing around,
understand.
some good ideas.
No, I'm not suggesting he doesn't have any ideas or whatever, but it just seems, I don't know.
It doesn't seem good
it
for
is
Mr.
it's
Carney.
like the mass it is like the mass hysteria, like you said before. I think you mentioned of COVID, or mass formation of COVID. It's this,
Mass
we
formation
seem to
psychosis.
be able to whip up Canadians into a frenzy here with this. I mean, and Trump's done no help to our cause, his cause, any cause with his,
Yeah,
he doesn't
he
seem to care.
said, I don't care who wins up
Yeah.
there. I'd prefer the Liberals, though.
Yeah, I don't know what that, I mean,
You know
that
what that
doesn't,
is? Because, again, he's the president of the United States of America. He's not the president from Mississauga. He doesn't care. Like, if we want to be silly, cool beans. I got enough fires to put out over here. Go be silly and waste your beautiful country full of resources and potential prosperity.
I was listening to, it was quite comical, a CBC half hour. I try to find the most, like, I don't know, like, I want to, again, I want to give full, like,
Listen to the
both
belly of the
sides
beast.
of the equation. Yeah, I want it both sides,
What's
like,
going on?
send it at me. And I just like within 1 minute of listening to the program, which is a half hour long about Trump's trade tariffs and negotiations and whatnot, like the whole half hour show was premised immediately on like three verifiable falsehoods, like right out of the gate. Like, what was the first one that was like, I mean, like just the term, this like manufactured term of just putting the word unjustified in front of tariffs, right? So I can understand it would slip past me if I wasn't paying attention, if it was just unjustified tariffs. But the word they kept saying was unjustified reciprocal tariffs. And then I thought to myself, well, if
That just means same.
if
He's
they're
doing same.
if they're reciprocal, that
He's
means
doing what
we're
we're doing.
giving. Yeah, they only kick in if you're. Yeah, so I'm like, okay, so right away, the first premise of the show is Canadians are being attacked with unjustified reciprocal tariffs, but they're unjustified. And then 2 seconds later, which I believe was long debunked, is they were talking like even now, like long debunked that Trump was following his Project 2025 tariff plan, right? So I know that categorically I've seen Trump say it had nothing to do with 2025. I know it's a group that there's some crossover in his administration of people who are in that heritage group. So
But it wasn't him, and he didn't
it's
endorse
not
it.
him, yes, and that. But so premise number two of this show was that the
It's just
reason, yeah, the reason why everything is so chaotic. The third point I'm saying is that they were saying there's no plan and it's chaos. So those were the three mistruths. 2025 unjustified reciprocal tariffs and it's chaos and
consensus for the sake of chaos.
it's just chaos, right?
Yeah.
So crazy. So I'm listening to it. So okay, I'm going to listen. I'm going to listen regardless. Even 1 minute in, I'm like, this is lunacy, but I'm going to listen. So the guy's going on. He's talking about this all those things I just said, and Project 2025 again does have and what his point was, it was so chaotic was because yes, indeed, Peter Navarro was one of the authors of the Project 2025, and Peter Navarro does work with Trump now, and he does have say with regards to tariffs. So there is some parallels in Trump's tariff plan, but he was saying that yes, the tariff plan has been implemented just like Project 2025 dictates, but why it's so chaotic is because Trump is not doing exactly what the 2025 plan outlines. So wrap your head around that. So the reason the chaos is there is because Trump is following Project 2025, but
But he's
not
not following it.
following it. But he's not following it.
Yeah.
So that's the source of the chaos, right? So there's a half-hour show dedicated to like you can't even get to a logical place from where they started from. But a logical place would be is the reason obviously it doesn't follow the trajectory of Project 2025 is because that's not Trump's plan, even though there's some similarity with regards to tariffs, because I mean, who wouldn't have an economic plan that didn't address tariffs? And then the guy had the nerve to say in the program, he went to say that the reason why it's so chaotic is that Trump was shocked that the Canadians had reciprocal tariffs, and he was like, I think he even said the words like it never occurred to Trump that like people would like I'm ridiculous. Like if you and we've never governed a thing. We were sitting down in a room and we had some like we were even playing a game of cards. And part of the game of cards was we had tariff card +2 against you, Adrian. You would know like, aha, but Jason, I have reciprocal tariff card. Like, of course you would anticipate reciprocal tariffs when you're putting a plan together. Why would this guy assume that like Trump is so dumb and all of his advisors around him are so dumb that they don't have a contingency plan. Not only do they not have a contingency plan, it never even crossed their minds that there could be reciprocal tariffs.
Well, I think what you're dealing with there is a reporter who's appealing to his base, and he knows that you could. That's what they want. They want the meat. They want, similar to, as I was joking to you earlier.
Not
I
even
want.
meat, it's gruel.
Well, no, but similar to like how I said with you with that guy on YouTube, we both found that I was like, I like that he does a good job of showing the downsides of Mark Carney, like on a day by day basis. So I love it. It was very selfish of me and biased of me to want to watch that. But similar to a lot of the people who read the CBC, they don't want to hear good things about Trump. They can't do that.
But it's not even about good things. I'm not
But they hit
saying
him with,
anything good about him.
but they hit him with buzzwords, and then they ended with, "By the way, Trump's still an idiot. Doesn't even
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
even think we'd have the tariffs. Like, got him." And you're just like, okay, cool, great article, buddy. Like, you missed a lot of the
Yeah,
points. I'm sure your base is happy with it ended the way they all wanted. Trump, dumb. Like,
yeah.
great.
Yeah,
That's what you're.
I don't like, yeah, that's bizarre. And I don't, not to go off on a tangent because I was trying to investigate Carney. I mean, what more do I have to say about Carney? We get it. I mean, here's the deal. I came up, here's my impressions after all the things I looked at for the last couple of days, Carney related, and being as, the problem is there's a, if you have, there's a fundamental ideological difference at the very root. Like, if you don't buy into the climate hysteria, full stop, which is the foundation, and social justice and that whole sort of, that movement that's been sort of running the show for a little bit, if you don't buy into that, then you can't, like, you, I don't even know how to say it. Like, you have to buy into it to even consider him. Like, of course, when I look at his resume and what he's been through, despite what his critics say, when I listen to him talk himself, he's a very capable, competent man. He seems like, yes, of course, I would like to have him running things and keeping, like, I mean, he's built $1 billion asset company, Brookfield Management, blah blah blah, or whatever. He's done all these things. He knows procedures, policies, and how things work. So you'd say, well, of course, he's the guy you want to be dealing with Trump as a world leader. But if you don't, like, but you can't, I can't ignore that it's more of the same nonsense. So in fact, it makes him even more menacing in some regards. And again, I'm not even getting the WEF stuff. I'm like, who cares? I'm just saying, if he is so committed to this green energy, this anti basic growth engine of Canada, and then that, which is then of itself going to be anti-American, like, that can only be a road that we go down that's not good. And if, and then, so then you say, okay, well, he's a man of the people. He was willing to take on, he's willing to do whatever it takes to get where he needs to go. So now he's going to just move the party more centrist from Justin, and he's going to abandon all his, like, climate proselytizing. So then, I mean, that's kind of weaselish too. I mean,
Yeah, and I don't think that's even been discussed. But you are right. No, I do think you hit the nail on the head with the word weasel. I think he does come across like a weasel the more I see him. Like, he seems like he's got something to hide. I'm telling you, like that. I feel like
yeah, but I mean,
under a microscope.
let's just stay in the world of what we know, right? I
No,
mean,
but
of
I mean,
course,
I just think under a microscope with what's out there for mainstream consumption. If you looked into Pierre for 10 minutes and you looked into Mark Carney for 10 minutes, like they're both like dorks and whatnot. But like Pierre, they're dorks for different reasons. Like Pierre's, you could crap on for being a lifelong public servant, which is like you don't really know what it's like out there in the real world. Although by his tone, he seems to have a better understanding than the average politician. Whereas with Carney, you could make the opposite case where it's like you seem like a billionaire banker with lots of shady backroom deals behind you and this and that and like hands in many a cookie jar. So it's hard to see where you really stand. You seem to have a hard time telling Canadians where you really stand. and you
Yeah.
seem to just
Well,
steal the other guy's platform. So, like, who are you, Mark Carney?
yeah. Well, and I was even thinking, like, even let's say, given the benefit of the doubt to the extreme, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Brookfield Management is heavily invested in um, energy
So, yeah.
around the world. So
Yes.
Canada being a major energy player, and these Trump everything tariffs all revolving around energy and energy dependent industries, you could almost argue how could anything that he governs on, even with his stuff in a blind trust, like I could know for a fact if I was heavily invested in energy from everywhere else in the world but here, my energy will go up if there's energy instability here. So, like, I mean, you'd have to question his motives, even if he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Like this,
What?
that.
Sell it
How
all.
could you?
Sell it all
Yeah,
and now govern. Don't hold all your vested interests in Brazilian African pipelines and selling Canadian coal to China and like everything exactly. Like you can't. You cannot
yeah,
trust him.
yeah. I don't know how he could. I don't know what meeting you could be in where he wouldn't have to recuse himself because of
Right.
conflict of interest.
And
So,
he
I mean,
wouldn't.
that's why I'm saying we don't need to go to the crazy, like
I
we
agree. No, I
we
agree.
we can stay in the world of just what he has said directly. Like
That's what I'm
keep
saying.
80% keep 80% of the fossil fuel in the ground. That's not a pro energy state. Like like I said, forget the WEF goblins. He's literally said in his book, keep 80% of fossil fuels in the ground. And everything he says, like all the wording that scares you about the WEF, for those who are scared, is in his book. Like it's all very like, you know, ooh, if you want to see it there. It's not explicitly there, but if you want to be scared about what Carney would make you do, like live in a shoebox and never fly anywhere, and you get your Christmas steak, and that's it. I mean, if you
Well,
want to see that, it's there.
and to your point of things we can already see, he's apparently already worse with reporters than Trudeau was, as far as like hiding from them, more or less. You know what I mean?
Well,
And
people have
and
indicated this. I think it's so true. It's like I was making the joke tonight. It's like this election seems to like reflect so perfectly, like like okay, so Biden was Biden, and he has a lot of comparisons to Carney that you could make. Backroom deals and sleazy weaselly and establishment protected, and then he's going against Trump, and then over here we're trying to paint, Carney as going against our Trump, Polyev, but just like America's the big times, that's American Idol or American politics. We have like the crappier, like
well,
Canadian politics.
and they're
So
almost
our
more opposite,
characters,
where like
well,
our conservative guy is the insider from the state who's trying to fix it.
yeah,
They're like
yeah,
our
but
yeah.
there's the comparisons are like never ending, and it's the same thing. Like the guy was making the comparison that Biden's best move was just to not give um, interviews, not go to the public, like be seen the least.
Good with
So
Carney. Let Trump
that's the
say
point I'm
something that
making.
offends people the day
Yes,
before the election, come out and
right,
comment on it, and then hope that wins you the election.
absolutely. So
Probably their plan.
five fast weeks, and he's not going to be accessible. He won't be. That's my
No.
prediction. He will be very inaccessible. Well, and even when he tried today, he had small turnout crowd, and he had bunch of angry fishermen out in
Called the cops on them in St.
St.
John.
John's. Yeah. So
Yeah. Just not a good look. Like it's just but yeah.
but then it will be turned. But then what does this person hear on the CBC tomorrow? He'll hear that it wasn't fishermen. It was
Far right.
conscripted far right antagonizers paid for by
Musk.
Paid for by Musk. Yeah, even better. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Musk behind the
Musk and
scenes. Musk.
Putin pitched in
Yeah,
together, yeah.
yeah. They passed a hat.
Well, and I thought you were going to touch on something that's kind of interesting too, but you didn't, which is like I think this election and like we're saying right now with the media kind of shows the divide politically. Like the liberals, just like Biden had the mainstream media. Carney's got the
Absolutely.
mainstream media,
Yeah,
and
and,
like,
Kamala Harris was appointed. Carney was appointed to the
yeah,
position right there. So yeah, there's a lot of comparisons. Again, comparisons don't mean anything, but where it may mean something is all I'm saying is right up until the election, Trump, even though the polls were reflecting he was leading, there was still this
it was 2 or 3
prevailing
points.
idea that he would still lose. And that's my
Hmm.
only hope, I suppose, here in light of this. I mean, comparisons don't mean anything, but coincidental or not. But where it might give us hope is that Trump ended up winning in a landslide because when enough time had settled and push came to shove, again, nobody's with you in the booth when you pull the lever, right? So it's popular on the street to say Trump is a dink, and but when you're in the booth, you go like, I can't have more of this Carney carbon
And
tax.
I
And
think that's what's going to happen. Like, people aren't just going to think back on, like, they're going. I think because, again, the elections are decided by like 5 to 7%. It's not 100% of people need to see the light all of a sudden, and you can't seriously back at the last 10 years and be in love with the Liberal Party more than you were 10 years ago. You know what I mean? You definitely lost love at a bare minimum.
oh, but
It's more
I'm
fear,
not,
hate for
I'm not
Trump more than
arguing
love for
with you.
liberals now. That's what
I
it
would
seems.
feel more confident if we were like, I'm not suggesting to anyone, so calm down, everyone. But if we were a two-party state, I would feel more confident that what we're talking about would apply. That, and people would want this. In the voting booth, you'd vote. Hold your nose and vote for Pierre because. But we just got such a. I don't know
I think
this.
I don't know. I've always thought about that. Maybe you're right, but I think when it comes to the two-party state or whatever, there's so many Americans who think that, like, oh, we just need that third party. That'll solve all.
No,
Like,
no,
so the grass is always greener. I think
nothing is
when it comes
perfect,
to that.
but we get a disproportionate number of liberal governments. If you go back historically,
Oh, you're
there's
right.
only two parties have been in power, and it's dramatically more. I'm not sure if this is true, but we could perplexity it, I suppose. But I have a feeling that there's been more of an equal exchange between blue and red in America's history. It's not such an overwhelming to one degree as it is in Canada. I think that's true, but let's not get bogged down on that in case I'm wrong.
I would agree with you, just off my assumption, but
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and that goes to one of the topics that I want to discuss tonight, and maybe that was a
Well, fire
baton.
away. I've said
Like,
my fill.
well, basically, one of the topics I want to discuss was the difference in forms of government between the American style of a constitutional republic and the Canadian style of a constitutional monarchy. And essentially, like Jay brought up there with the two-party system and whatnot, you don't necessarily have to just have two parties in a constitutional republic. But basically, the main difference now that I kind of think makes for the reaction, it makes sense, the reaction by Canadians to me. As a Canadian who wants to join America, as a fan of that with our Unification Party bid here, me being the second member, obviously I support that conversation. But it helps me understand why the majority don't like that. And I think a big part of that has to deal with the fact that the benefits of monarchy tend to favor an older population, because an older population would prefer stagnation. Like, they don't want to overturn the apple cart. And with a constitutional republic, you do get those 4-year terms and quick reforms and this and that maybe you wouldn't necessarily see due to the way the parliamentary process works in one versus the other. So it helped me understand why a lot of Canadians would be so opposed to the idea. Like, I think if you look at the population of Canada, it's like an upside down pyramid, more or less. Like, the majority, what would you say? What's your guess the average age in Canada is right now? Like 42.8 or something? Or
Unrelated to this, this will give us some insight, but this not exactly I know that, but I know that in the world, 10% of the population is over 65. In Canada,
30?
20% of the population is over 65.
Okay.
And in the province we live in, 25% of the population is over
Okay.
65. And I think the median age an average age in Canada is getting up into be in the high 40s now.
Yeah, that would, like, I get with the different
And that's
forms,
an
like
old population.
and you could see the corollary in the States too, even with this is the first time ever that they've kept track of studies where the 18 to 25 demographic is more conservative than the over 60 demographic. And this applies to both Canada and America right now. And you could attribute that whereas like the young people, they kind of want to shake things up. You know, I mean, what they see is like perhaps too daunting and like doesn't fit with their plans for the future. Whereas the old people are kind of just like, no, like keep the government going. Like we don't need less stuff. Let's just keep the stuff going. It's worked out well my life, and and so basically, like the for the conclusion, like the common people, a constitutional republic offers greater control over their government, but risks instability and short-sightedness, potentially neglecting their long-term needs. So, whereas a constitutional monarchy provides continuity and a less polarized political culture, yet it burdens its citizens with unelected elite that may feel irrelevant or unjust. The
Well,
republic.
say more about that. That just what does that mean exactly?
Well, essentially like bureaucracy. Like when you have too much bureaucracy, like you don't know who's there and why they've been doing whatever, but they've been at the government for 35 years. Like you get more of that with the constitutional monarchy than you do in a republic. And as you can see with what's
So
going
what
on
you're
with
saying,
Doge,
so you get these sort of more like more of an
entrenched.
institutionalized, entrenched, okay, connection between the
And
ruling party and the institutions,
yeah,
and then it becomes onerous because
correct.
there's nothing to shake it up.
And right now, what's going on in the States is such a big deal, even though they are a constitutional republic, which is trying to clean up that bureaucracy, not necessarily remove all of it, but trying to cut out all of it and then put back what they need and then kind of go kind of like they say with Elon's approach to Twitter, like cancel all the credit cards and then we'll see what we really need and then we'll pay those guys and then we'll let the rest just go. You know what I mean? Like, so, and that's even hard to do in a constitutional republic where it's actually like supposed to happen. So, like, it's never going to happen in Canada until I don't even know, right? Like, who knows? Like maybe we'll all just be working for the government one day. It's like it seems to be the plan, but it kind of makes sense, right? Like so basically the monarchies tend to like they do tend to have some good things, like they lead to social equality and they tend to like programs from the government, to appease the people. So it's not all bad, but it does make sense as to why Canada with an aging population would, maybe not necessarily want to rock the boat on that. Like I know when I bring up our idea to like even my mother, an older lady, her number one thing is healthcare. And she has all the reason in the world to maybe question the healthcare with stuff that's happened in the past with our family. But still to her, at her age, she wants to know that she has it and that she can go in and they don't have to sell the car, which I can't blame them. You know what I mean? Like obviously you don't want to make a
No,
change like
absolutely. And
that.
again, but no one has ever suggested that we give up the health care,
No,
that we
well, we've
change
never
the nature of our
really
health.
got into the black and white of what we want. We just want to have the open dialogue and work out the framework.
Absolutely. Well, like figure it out.
Yeah.
It's like our futures, the two countries' futures are so intertwined that there's no other
Harmony
solution.
is the only path. Harmony is the only path. Let's get to
Absolutely.
the big boy wants to do that now. Okay, we'll suck it up. And how can we, mitigate our way of living with what they want to do and keep it as much of our way while still not, being the bees attacking the bear.
So basically, to sum up, what you're saying is, in our present system, it's less of a rocky boat, and that's what our old
Is one of the
population
benefits of
was.
it. Yeah, exactly. Less polarizing. Another topic I want to discuss was the Canadian military, something I've mentioned on the show a few times. And in the past in my life is like my gripe that the Canadian military the Department of Defense doesn't buy enough from America. Well, I'm wrong. I've done some research, finally, I guess. And yeah, those subs that got a lot of media attention, um, they did eat up the media. But I guess like basically from what I can find for the last since like 1959, we've bought like 70 to 80% of our stuff from America. Full stop. Closer to 80. And even those subs that we bought, the Victoria class submarines, they were purchased from the UK in 1998, but they're full of US made sonar and weapon systems. Like all the technology inside the sub is American made as well.
It's
Like,
just assembled in Britain, essentially.
well, no, I think what it was more like, I haven't looked into it much more than this, but my takeaway was kind of like we bought the Mustang with the 315 in it, and we upgraded to a 420, kind of like we fixed it up. But and even like our frigates, our Halifax frigates, we build those here. But like again, all the weapon system, all the radar that comes from the States. Like our planes, the C-18 Hornets, as well as the I think they're the F-15s that we're buying now. Like pretty much every. So I was wrong. We actually do a lot of that. So again, that's even more.
But I thought that was part of what NATO was all about. Like, so we had like we all bought the same stuff. Yeah, absolutely. And if our pilots could go jump in that guy's plane, and away you go.
And I've kind of found that looking into the radar deal Mr. Carney made last week, that's kind of my takeaway too. Because actually, like if you look into that with the Australian company, the Australians have been using that technology. The pardon my pronunciation, Jindalee Operational Radar Network. They've been using that since the early 2000s. And compared to the American model, it actually has like a much smaller footprint, like as far as infrastructure is needed for it. So there's a huge, like that was like one of the main factors as to why we went that way. And obviously if Australia's using it, like they're integrated with America. So it's not like America couldn't do it. Like the biggest company, because it was initially started by the Australian government, the biggest company involved is BAE. It's like a British aerospace defense company. So it's technically still in the Commonwealth with that factor as well. And like, so it should work fine with the American stuff. The kind of unfortunate part that I learned about the matter is there was a Canadian company out of Ottawa that was trying to win the bid, but they basically just didn't cut the mustard, so to say. And I mean, you could make a case as a patriot, which apparently everybody is all of a sudden, that like maybe our government should have funded that company a little bit more to help it stay competitive with like General Dynamics and all those guys. Or maybe they just realized, it was a loss leader. I don't know. But
remind me again, when you set out, you were trying to figure out your presupposition was that the Canadians always didn't buy very much American stuff, and we always ended up with
Commonwealth garbage. I thought we always just bought Commonwealth garbage.
Okay, we were the dumpster for the rest of the Commonwealth's stuff.
Yes.
Okay, so then you found out, no, that's not true. 80%, let's just say.
Everything.
Well, yeah, that would have been my assumption. So
pretty much everything.
But I do remember hearing those stories, like you said, of like some junky thing from here or some busted plane from France, but that's probably why they made the news. So good, we learned something.
That's exactly it. Think about like back then, like you wouldn't want us to be looking like weak to the Americans. Be like, hey, look, we got more stuff from England or Germany. Like we have German tanks, like Leopard tanks. But again, even those have American firing systems inside them. So the one thing I have learned though is like in reality, like we can't go to war with America because like they sell us the munitions, full stop. So like that's not it's even off the table. Even if it was
for sure
thing that could happen.
But so in your investigation of this military stuff, you came across this satellite or not satellite radar station, and that was where in the north, correct?
That's in the north. Yeah, it's $6 billion.
So was that part of Carney's?
That's what he announced last week. He announced that last week. Yeah.
Yeah, he went there, right? Did he not go to
the whole big deal is that he didn't run it by America first, which is foolish. But at the end of the day, it is looking like it's kind of like him taking like a big man on campus move, because it really isn't that combative.
No, but he didn't like. Obviously, he had nothing to do with that.
And 100%. There's no question about it. Like these deals, like if you recall anything with like that admiral who got in trouble for talking about ship procurements and the way it was run through the Liberal government and all that, like these things take so much time and the paperwork's so bogged down. And that's what exactly, like the little bit of digging out, it's like, this is actually a pretty decent radar. it actually looks like a good thing. And it looks like something that Trump is actually probably going to be stoked about. Like, oh, you're investing in the Arctic. Like, you actually are ponying up money for your military spending. So you could make it's a good. I'm just trying to be, look at both sides here. It's a positive case, I'd say, for Mr. Carney. Like, it wasn't as brash and silly as it looked at first glance as someone who isn't a fan of the man. And the one thing I will say, our airplanes, like, we need to get new airplanes. Like, have you heard of like our CF-18 Hornets? Like, we've lost like 20 airplanes since like 1982. We had like 138 McDonnell Douglas CF-18 Hornets, and like 20 of them have crashed. Like, I think there's been a lot.
What's going on? What's going on with this deal with the states? How many were we supposed to buy from the states?
Just to clarify what I was just saying,
Sorry.
they crashed since 1982, and like the most of them stopped in 2005. So this isn't a Trudeau issue. This is just to be clear. This isn't a Carney thing. But from the States, the F-35 Lightning II, we've been buying since 2022. We're buying 88 of them. Lockheed Martin F-35 stealth fighters for $14 billion. The deliveries are starting in 2026. And it's the largest purchase in decades. So that bodes well. But even the Hercules, that big plane, we buy that from the States.
No, but I thought they were talking about canceling that or trying to cancel those 88.
I could see them throwing that around because as far as a card's concerned to play, it's one of the cards our country has when it comes to trade with the States.
Yeah, no, but I've heard directly about that's not. Anyways, doesn't matter. But I'm saying they're talking about buying planes from Sweden or something. I've seen thumbnails plenty about
do you recall a story back in the 90s? I recall there being a story. I should have looked into it, and maybe I could right now. But Mulrooney had set this order for these like Sea King helicopters, and like when Chrétien came in, he like canceled the order for them. I believe it was the Sea Kings, and like we ended up just being like a government boondoggle where Chrétien ended up years later ordering the helicopters, and like after we paid all the back taxes to Boeing and everything like that, we ended up like paying double.
That wasn't that the Airbus scandal?
It might have been. It might not have been the Sea Kings, but there was like some, and that seems to be an issue that happens, like where one government puts in an order and the other comes in and does the books and is like, nah. But
there's no way that it can be like that because these like go buy a car and try that. Pay your deposit and get for your delivery.
There was a penalty for the one I'm talking about, and if what you're talking about has any merit and they cancel the order with Lockheed Martin, there will be a penalty. And it's not like 2%, you don't get your deposit back. These penalties are like 35% of what you would have paid at starting. You know what I mean? They're usually pretty high.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but nonetheless, I'm stoked about the radar. I'm stoked we are buying stuff from the States. I just remember being young and dumb and
okay. Here, I just did a quick update. So Mark Carney has not directly threatened to cancel Canada's F-35 jet order, but has ordered a review. This is, I guess, what I had heard. Ordered a review of the purchases and has asked Defense Minister Bill Blair to examine whether the contract is the best investment for Canada, given the changing environment.
So he's playing a card. Like, that's one of the few cards he has that's reasonable that maybe Trump might listen to, because Trump loves a good arms deal.
Yeah, well, for sure. But did you hear about Hyundai's deal today?
No, what happened?
Hyundai's opening a factory in Louisiana.
You mean, weren't they the ones supposed to build in Woodstock, Ontario?
I don't know, but they're building in Louisiana. And according to, since Trump has come in, they've attracted $4 trillion in investment spending. So apparently, despite all the chaos, and that there's no plan. There's no plan.
It's a money magnet. It's a money magnet.
There's no plan, and it's chaos. Somehow, $4 trillion is being spent, has been committed already in manufacturing and investment in the United States. So I guess the problem is, to sum up, I guess, before we wax eloquently forever, is Carney's a capable person, obviously. But ideologically, you can't get on board, but I would say that 80% of the voting public wouldn't dig deep enough or believe the worst scenarios that can come out of these policies and procedures that Carney would most likely put in place based on his previous statements and track record. So I don't know. I mean, they did recruit a formidable person to. I mean, I don't know how formidable he would be if there wasn't this rhetoric coming out of the United States. Like if it had just been a normal United States election, and then
You nail
we
on the
were
head
still
there.
on the affordability issue. I don't know how he would do, but also we have to say there's still 5 weeks left, right? So Pierre's no idiot either, and he has some people around him.
It's
And
moving in
maybe
the right
once the
direction.
dust settles. And I did hear something I was listening to say that Kim Campbell was, when she took over the party was in the dumps.
It was at
Like,
18%, and then it got a bump
she
to
went to, yeah, like
35.
37, yeah, something
Yeah.
like that. And then cratered after.
So exactly.
So Carney could possibly have the same sort of trajectory. And once the grind of day-to-day mic talking and policy talking and whatnot, and the conservatives get their opportunity to shine a light on some of Carney's, shortcomings or criticisms, then I guess anything's possible. I don't know. I have
Well,
no idea how to call
I don't
this.
think he's doing himself. I think he's doing himself less favors than more than by being in front of the camera. So we'll probably won't see too much of him. And after, those fishermen showed up in St. John's, that they're gonna button down something like that. That's not what they want.
Yeah, I don't know. And I have heard that, again, I don't know if any of these things are true, but apparently anywhere Pierre goes, he can get 1,000, 2,000 people to show up. And
What I
even
see.
Carney, even with all the excitement of new Carney, you can't get
That's what
the
he pulled
same
in
numbers.
Ottawa, a liberal hotbed, the night he was elected for the leadership of the party. And that's what you
Yeah,
barely pulled in. He can do it in rural, Woodstock, Ontario,
yeah,
or
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
and that's what I
so
mean.
if
That's where it's very Trump Biden-esque, where it's like, oh, the guy in the basement is crushing it, and you have to pay people to come, and the other guy just like can't walk into a McDonald's without the place erupting.
yeah, getting high fives and yeah.
Yeah, totally different
Yeah, so
vibe,
I
but
don't
it's
know.
the same.
Well, that was the comparison, I think, but we'll see what happens. Well, I think it was another fantastic episode. I've got my papers here on my desk that I got to get filled out today for the party status and something or other, but we'll get on that as soon as possible to get our nomination papers in and get all that going, I suppose. But until then, I guess we'll just keep strategizing for what our next steps are. I'll talk
Yeah,
to you
we'll
later,
keep
buddy.
talking. Take care. Bye,
Bye.
everybody. Thanks for watching.
Wow!